All right, agenda item number 14. Under our general items, we have the Transportation Development Act claim for fiscal year 2017-2018. We have Spencer. Is your voice surviving?
Oh, it's just lovely. Thank
I might
you.
lose mine.
I hope not.
I think I'm right behind you.
Well, thank you, Mayor Didball, members of the council. This item I'm bringing before you is the 2017-18 Transportation Development Act claim for your consideration and a request to pass a resolution to submit our claim to SACOG. Following my presentation and before you take an action, Public Works Director Diana Langley will be presenting some further information about the use of these funds. In 1971, TDA legislation was passed to provide funding to counties for transit and non-transit related purposes. This legislation improves existing public transportation services through a regional transportation plan. The TDA has two major funding sources, the Local Transportation Fund and the State Transportation Assistance Fund. The LTF is derived from a quarter-cent general sales tax. Some localities can use LTF for local streets and road projects if all transit needs are met. Sales tax currently in Sutter County is 7.5%. 1/4% is collected by the state and allocated back to local agencies based on population. Yuba City's portion this year is $2,452,209, a decrease of 23.7%. $1.4 million of that goes to YSTA for transit. $73,000 is designated for SACOG planning. This leaves $957,774 available for Yuba City streets and roads specifically. The figures on this chart represent the amounts allocated in previous years and may actually vary from amounts received. These are the old 5-year history of the YCTA shares of these funds and the city shares as well. So you can just see graphically how they've bumped along, and they've matched pretty well as far as the amount of growth. Staff's recommendation for your vote, once you've heard Diana's presentation, is to adopt a resolution authorizing submission of the city's fiscal year 17-18 TDA claim to the Sacramento Area Council of Governments, or SACOG. Do you have any questions for me?
Madam Mayor,
yes.
Just a point of clarification for Mr. Morrison. I believe our local rate is 7.25%.
I think you may be correct on
Okay,
that.
just to clarify with the council, and that might just be, I know the states moved the rate back and forth, so that might have been an old reference.
I believe you're correct.
Just to clarify, thank you,
Thank you for the correction.
Thank you, Steve. Any questions for Spencer before Diana comes up? Okay. Spencer, you can go rest your voice.
All right, thank you, Mayor and Council. So the focus of my presentation tonight is more as to how LTF funds fit into the broader picture of funding road projects. So ongoing projects funded through TDA include striping and markings, drainage improvements, traffic signals, ADA sidewalk improvements, the stormwater management program, and road rehabilitation. Completed projects which utilize TDA funds include Bridge Street reconstruction, Bogue Road rehabilitation, which is under construction right now, nearly completed, and then the recently completed Garden Highway improvements. Upcoming projects shown in the 5-year capital improvement program to be partially funded through TDA include the Tully Parkway Queens Avenue Extension Project, Blevin Road improvements, El Margarita Road improvements, Sanborn Road improvements, the Centerboard Streetlight Pole Replacement Project, and the Franklin Avenue Pedestrian Improvement Project. So to switch gears a little bit, so how do these funds tie into the overall picture. When you look at the city's maintained mileage road stats, we have 227 miles within the city limits. Of that, it's broken down 30 miles for arterials, 34 miles for collectors, and 163 miles for local roads. And in 2015, we prepared a pavement management system in which we determined that the pavement condition index, which is an index that's based upon not only the structural integrity of the road, but also the rideability of the road, with 0 being the worst and 100 being the best. 2015 Yuba City's PCI was 67, which falls within the fair designation. The 2017 PCI has actually dropped to 63. And so when you consider, over time, if you're not putting in money into the ongoing rehabilitation of the roadways, that PCI is going to drop. And then when you add into that the incredibly wet winter this last year, that really wreaked havoc on our roadways. So why is the pavement condition index so critical? When a road's brand new and it has a PCI of 100, you really want to catch the maintenance within the preventive maintenance section, because once you drop below that threshold, the maintenance costs increase dramatically. So you can see with a current PCI of 63, we would be looking at an asphalt rubber cape seal or a thin AC overlay, which has a price anywhere from $7 to $20, versus if you catch the roadway within the first 10 to 12 years where you're doing a slurry seal, your maintenance costs are $2 to $4 a square yard. So significantly different. And then once you get to a point where a roadway is in really poor condition, where you're getting into the thick AC overlay or the reconstruction, you have to do an analysis of should your money go. Should it go into roadways that are considered good, so you keep that good rating, or do you want to put it all into roadways that are considered poor or fair because you need to bring the roadway back up? So total funds available for road projects, you have the LTF funds, Highway Users Tax Account, the recently approved Road Maintenance Rehabilitation Act, which many people know better as SB1, Road Maintenance Franchise Fee, and then you have to deduct out of that the operational costs for the city. So that includes the street division to do their ongoing work associated with maintenance, street sweeping, that type of stuff. So when you look at that, the total available for projects is approximately $3 million. So when you have $3 million available for projects, approximately $1.5 million, which is that, going back to the Road Maintenance and Rehabilitation Act, that SB1, that $1.5 million would go towards arterial and collector rehabilitation. You have the franchise fee, which go towards residential road rehab in the amount of $500,000. That only leaves $1 million available for your ongoing projects and then other projects. And so those other projects would be match funds for grants for roadways or for other road type projects that aren't necessarily considered maintenance. So for instance, if you need to put a storm drain line into a roadway, that goes above and beyond our normal storm drainage account, or you need to widen a roadway, that wouldn't necessarily be eligible, or you wouldn't spend your other money on that roadway. So when you look at ongoing maintenance funding needs, when I came before you in January 2016, I noted that we need $5.9 million annually to maintain our PCI at 67. At that time, we were looking at funding about $1.5 million annually, in which we would predict that our PCI would drop to 42 by 2035. Using this $2 million annually, our PCI will drop to 45 by 2035. So what does that look like? Well, let me first go back to this. So why is PCI so critical? So you can see as we continue down that scale of going from a PCI of 63 down to 45, then those costs, those maintenance costs, increase dramatically. You're then going from, at the green section, the preventive maintenance of $2 to $4 a square yard, you're now getting into a thick AC overlay, which is $30 to $40 a square yard. So what does a PCI of 45 roadway look at? Right now, Garden Highway, which we all recognize is in very poor condition if you go south of Lincoln Road, that's about a PCI of 39. If you look at Ainsley Avenue between Gray and Clark, it's hard to see in this picture, but there's a lot of alligator cracking. There's some large longitudinal cracking. There's some raveling. So over time, if we continue at $2 million annually, that's what we have to look forward to in terms of the conditions of our roadways by 2035. So to summarize, TDA LTF funds are vital to fund road projects. And I just want to note, so the Road Maintenance and Rehabilitation Act is very helpful in providing additional money to the city, but it's not the answer to our maintenance needs, overall. So we will still have a significant shortfall to fund ongoing road maintenance as we continue on. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, back to the council. Any questions for Diana?
Through the mayor. So Diana, with the current technologies and some of the different materials, when we do new road construction, we look at a little longer lifespan for that roadway, and I would specifically point back to Garden Highway, because there's newer materials that can be used to stabilize the type of soil that lies underneath that roadway surface, also stabilizing it for the heavy truck traffic that it currently sees. Some of the same things that were just done to Bridge Street and Bogue Road.
Correct. So there's a lot of materials you can use to stabilize the base layer and the subbase under the base rock, stabilize the base layer, and then also things that you can add to the pavement, such as the rubber material that will help long term. But it doesn't help with the oxidation of the asphalt over time. So the sun baking the asphalt, the oil's oxidizing out. And so that's really the intent of a slurry seal, to add the oil back into that roadway surface and renew the life of the roadway. If you can catch a road during that time frame, then you increase the pavement condition index of that road and extend the life even further. The issue is if you don't do that initial maintenance within the first 10 to 12 years, and you start to get into where it's a good rating or fair rating, then you start to have to do more. You're starting to get into the rubber cape seal, the thin AC overlay, and with that, you get additional costs because you're just addressing not only the actual roadway, but the ADA improvements as well in terms of the curb returns and ramps. So there are things you can do up front to make sure that you have a very, very stable section so it doesn't fail under the truck traffic, but you still have to treat the surface of the roadway on a routine basis to extend the life of the asphalt.
So, this is gonna be not overly protracted, but I've got just a couple points that hopefully that the public can kind of understand. When we do a curb to curb rehabilitation, and I'm not talking about cape seal, I'm talking about replacement of the surface itself. That then requires that we do all of the current code ADA improvements. Is that correct?
Actually, no, there's been, within the last few years, it's changed. So even if you go into the less intrusive maintenance, you still have to update the ADA curb returns.
But it's not cape seal.
Yes, with cape seal.
Even with cape seal.
Yes. Ben, that's correct, right? Yes.
So how, and just again for the public's knowledge, how often in the last 20 years, how many different iterations of ADA ramps do we have curbside?
Oh, within the last 20 years, if I were this would be strictly a guess. In terms of the city standard details, we've probably had 3. In terms of Caltrans standard details, there's more significant numbers of iterations because of having to just meet different requirements in terms of the scoring, the tactile domes, where they want the placement of the ramps. And so it has changed significantly over the years.
So where there's just an active ramp that has just concrete scoring, if we go in and we replace surface, we're required to go to the more advanced.
Correct.
Okay. And what's just one curb cut on average? What?
Approximately $4,000.
$4,000 to upgrade the code or the type of ramp. So keeping that in mind, as individuals are thinking about how much does it cost to do this and what are we looking at, the next question I have for you, Diana, is how much of the effect on the PCI is from vehicle traffic, just daily vehicle traffic?
From your normal daily vehicle traffic, it doesn't have a significant effect. It's where you have a lot of it is trench cuts that haven't been properly backfilled and paved. You have failure of the sub base or the base. And for Yuba City, where we've inherited a lot of county roadways, typically what you find is there's either no base rock underneath the asphalt or it's a very poor section. So we've inherited a lot of very poorly constructed roadways to begin with. And then also other roadways, the level and load of truck traffic was not anticipated when those were designed. And then finally, in some areas we tend to have unstable soils and that there's a lot of water intrusion and things like that. So water is the enemy of roadways as well. Once the water makes its way into the cracks of the roadway, it can undermine the base and sub-base of the road.
So I guess one of the questions that I'm trying to head toward is as we use our roadways and as we're looking at design, carrying large amount of vehicle traffic on, let's say, a 4-lane roadway, would be more cost beneficial to have the 4-lane carrying more traffic than we would just on simply a 2-lane roadway. Am I correct?
In terms of the volume of traffic, it's more beneficial to have that higher volume on the larger roadway where it was designed from the beginning to be subject to those loads.
And the reason that I point that out is as we look at future designs throughout the city of Yuba City, is making sure that we can carry those loads on those utilizing collectors to arterial roadways and then dumping them onto the state highway. Activating the traffic onto the state highway system would be far more beneficial to us, or utilizing some of our more high capacity designed roadways that we're currently looking at.
Correct.
So places like Walton Avenue would be one where we look from basically Hain all the way down to Bogue Road. There's width there in some areas for 4-lane, and it carries a fairly significant number of vehicles. So some rehabilitation in the future to 4-lane would be beneficial to our community. Am I correct?
Yeah, Walton Avenue is designated in the general plan as a 4-lane arterial.
Here's the bottom line to all that. On a 4-lane roadway, what do we look at for a dollar figure to be able to do 1 mile of roadway with improvements, curb gutter? Typically, in some of those areas, we're going to have to do some of that. But and with all of the ADA rehab that would be going on, what would just be a rough estimate per mile of roadway to go 4-lane?
Boy, I don't know that I can just pull that number out of my head.
Ben's got it back there in the back. He's got the calculator already working. Just go with the road figure for right now.
He's afraid you're going to hold him to it later.
Nobody's going to hold you to it. $4 million. $4 million for a mile. If we go to your slide that shows how much money we have available, it'd be a clear indication that our community does not have the ability to build with the current funding those type of roadways or make those improvements. And I'm just trying to be perfectly clear that this community will need to start looking at measures that will raise funds outside of the current boundaries of the state, federal government, Caltrans, or the state to include Caltrans, and all of the other funding sources that we currently have to be able to really put together a roadway system or a street system here that will be effective and well maintained in our community up into 2035. And that's without any large projects.
Yeah, I will make the distinction with Walton Avenue. That would be eligible for developer impact fees since you would be increasing capacity. But in terms of our road diff funds, we don't have a significant amount available there either.
And we're just talking about building new
Correct.
roadways. We're not talking about the maintenance, ongoing maintenance, and other things.
Correct.
So I think that, and the reason that this may be a little protracted out is we have a great relationship regionally with SACOG, and I think we utilize them appropriately. But our community certainly needs to look, whether it be city and county, need to look at some of the self-help measures that are out there that would bring a larger amount of funding forward to our community. And that's my pre-Christmas interjection about what's on my wish list for the future.
That's a great wish list.
That's all I have.
And Councilmember Buckland is on our SACOG committee, so he's a great representative for us there. So his questions are well worthy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Motion? Action? Yes.
Move to approve staff's
Element
recommendation.
impact. Yeah, I was trying to figure out which one I was going to say.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Yes.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay. Motion approved. Thank you, Spencer. Thank you, Diana.